Hello everybody and welcome to weeks 8 to 10 of our module on action research about children at risk in community context. Now that you have completed your research design and methodology script, hopefully you have a better understanding of your project and are keen to get down into the nitty-gritties of conducting the action research cycles. By now, you should have a clear plan of action for engaging with your research context. Often, this stage would prolong for months as organizations or even communities, they take time to understand the new intervention and appropriate it in their own lives. However, for us, we just have 2 or 3 weeks. I completely understand the limitations of the time period that we have at our disposal. And yet, here we are, we want to do those interventions and we do hope for positive transformation. It does take time to change perceptions and behaviors, but we believe that if we do it well, maybe the degree will be less, but change can definitely come about. In this session, in this teaching session for this 3 weeks, I want to do 3 things. First, I want to talk about the logistics of conducting an action research cycle. Secondly, I want to give insights from my own experience of doing action research and talk about how I conducted my cycles of research. And finally, I want to share some thoughts on data collection during this process. Let's always keep in mind, it's action for transformation as well as data for research. And both of this go hand in hand together in our research project. So let's begin with the key logistics requirements for carrying out an action research intervention cycle. Number 1, you already know this, identifying the key stakeholders. Now, you've already done it. It's part of your initial pilot as well as your research design and methodology. And yet I want to stress this again because it's no longer a general term like organizational managers or community workers, children workers, or pastors, or whoever you felt is a key stakeholder. Now, these terms translate into living humans, people you're going to work with. So right at the beginning, you want to make sure that you have them with you on this action research project. You have to make sure that they are going to support you. The key individuals, the key stakeholders, they have understood your project and they're willing to be part of it. In my view, there are at least 3 kinds of stakeholders. First, the management of the organization, the church, or the agency that you are working with. Now, the management is very important because it's them who takes decisions. It's they who actually grant permissions for workers to function in a certain way. And when you bring your interventions, you're bringing a bit of new work to the workers because they have to do their routine responsibilities and works that is outlined for them. And apart from that, they have to also do what's required in terms of being part of your project. So this requires extra permissions, special leeways from the management. So they need to be part of this. They are the policy makers And if any change you initiate needs to become part of the organization, then it is these guys who need to be with you on it. Secondly, the workers or the primary caregivers. They are important because they are the ones who are implementing the projects and the programs with the children. They engage with the community, the children, their parents. They are your implementers. If they are not with you, even if the management wholeheartedly agrees to your work, nothing is going to take place at ground zero. And finally, the children themselves, along with their families and communities. They are the receivers of care and development, and we want to benefit them, and yet they are equal stakeholders, decision makers, and they need to have a buy-in to the changes you're proposing for them. Number two, we need to build ownership. Of course, you already must have built a good rapport with the organizational stakeholders who believe in your intervention. They have already given you permission to intervene, otherwise you wouldn't be able to do your work. Your management stakeholders must have the authority to take program decisions. You cannot work with them thinking that they will do what's necessary and find later that they are not able to take those decisions. Your executive stakeholders, the community workers, they must believe in what you're doing. They must be inspired to implement the interventions you're suggesting. You're creating awareness about this intervention amongst the children and their families. But you are not doing the primary intervention with the children. Please remember this. It's the organizational workers. You are not directly implementing the intervention. If you do it, then the intervention will definitely flourish while you're doing it, but it'll also come to an end when you finish your project. So you have to inspire the executives or the workers who are committed to be with the children every day for long periods of time. Thirdly, the intervention plan. You need to divide this main intervention into 2 or 3 small parts or bits, and each of that gets implemented in different weeks. What I mean is that you need to sit with the workers and talk about the 2-3 elements or stages of actions they need to do in order to get the complete intervention happen. And every week you chip away a little bit, but you're very clear if it's 3 weeks or 2 weeks, and you divide or break up your intervention into those parts. Fourthly, we come to the planned weekly meetings. So this is where the intervention takes place. The intervention cannot be haphazardly brought in. A conversation in the corridor, a closed door meeting, a little motivational talk to the children. No, that's not how it's going to happen. It has to be organized very precisely, very clearly. And what you're doing is that there's a clear plan and there's an allocated, structured meeting within which you discuss all this. You could agree whether the meeting should be on a Monday or a Tuesday, and plan for the cycle to be completed within the whole week. For example, you could begin with the intervention on a Monday or a Tuesday with the management and the workers. And here you not only have a teaching component for them to give an input into them, but you also work out a list of actions they need to do with the children and their families if necessary. Furthermore, you work out what actions they will give to the children and their families to do after their meeting with them. So you're planning this meticulously before the intervention. Now, you don't impose this list of actions But in your meeting with them, you discuss it and you broadly agree on the tasks and you allow it to emerge out of the meeting. But you have done your work, you have done your homework. Then you expect them to carry out the intervention with the children and their families on Wednesday or Thursday. Now sometimes you can even be there during Wednesday or Thursday to see what's happening, how the intervention is being carried out. And sometimes you can even act as a coach. Finally, on Friday, they report back to you and give their feedback. They give feedback from themselves, how they felt, what they felt something should change or something should be dropped or something should be added. Then they also give feedback from their engagement with the children and their families. What did the children and the families report back to them? And all this feedback is highly important because that's going to feed into your next intervention cycle. So you have Saturday, Sunday probably to mull over, to reflect, to think through so that you can analyze the feedback and develop your second intervention. In my own research with Shiksha Rath in Delhi, I followed a similar plan. In our pilot research, we had done about 6 to 8 key interviews amongst the stakeholders and we had identified the problem we wanted to address. We held 4 weeks of intervention. The primary stakeholders we intervened with were the Shiksha Rath workers who worked every day with the children. They had to be inspired to do holistic child development. They had to be taught the new approach and thinking we were bringing into the organizational ecosystem. However, they had to then go on and carry this out with the children as well as their parents. So we have to give them very clear instructions on what to do and how to do it. Remember, the management stakeholders are already bought in, otherwise you would not be able to carry out your research project. Or they wouldn't even give space for the workers to do what is necessary in their daily work. So it's a good thing if our interventions align with the organizational goals and vision. Now you have to clearly design a feedback form for the workers to fill and send it to you by Friday. We had an online form. So after every meeting they had with the children and their families, they collected the feedback, their own and the others, and they filled it up and they emailed us by Friday. Maybe for you it's going to be different. It could be a phone call, a WhatsApp response, or maybe it's just them meeting you again on Friday. It doesn't matter how the methodology is, but you need to get their feedback before you plan your next intervention. The form that we gave them not only asked them to give feedback on how they felt the intervention was, but also about how the children and the community responded. The next step is data collection. So how did we collect data and how should you collect data even as you do your action research project? The intervention cycles are exciting as you're already engaging in the life of the project. You can immediately start to see changes in the programming and activities. It brings immense pleasure to see that you have thought through something, you made a suggestion, and here are a group of people who actually are carrying it out. So I had done some work for this organization and we produced a handbook. We titled it as Nurturing Children Together. And the next time I met some of them after a year, they started referring to the NCT material. And for the first few moments, I was perplexed. What is the NCT material? And they used it as a matter of fact. They used it as some resource that was in process. It's part of the organizational vocabulary. And I actually had to turn to one of them and said, "What is NCT?" And he looked at me, half amused. And he said, "Nurturing Children Together, the handbook that you produced." And I was shocked. that the little work with research that we had done had actually become part of organizational culture and language. And so this is going to be very exciting for you, that you are actually going to influence organizations, the way they think and the way they talk and the way they behave. Some of the management representatives might sit in on the interventions you do with the workers to make sure it aligns with their weekly plan of the organization, and that is totally fine. So now it's exhilarating to do these interventions of change and transformation, but now you're also a researcher and you have to collect data. So very quickly, a few insights on data collection. Number one, your preparation for the intervention is data. All that you do, the documents you prepare, the slides you make for your intervention meeting, whatever you do for the meeting, that's data. Secondly, your intervention with the workers, either on a Monday or a Tuesday, must be recorded, and this is a source of data because it'll be interactive. The workers would be talking, they would be engaging with you, and you would be responding to them. Thirdly, when the workers are carrying out the intervention with the children and the families, we can ask them to collect data for us. So give them some leading questions. Even as they talk with the children and carry out, find out how the children and their families respond. And so we need to prepare them for that. And finally, the reporting back by the workers after they have fulfilled their engagement with the children and the families. So all of this is data, and you require them all to be analyzed to understand how your intervention fared. I'm requiring you to do a maximum of 2 or 3 cycles. I'm happy with 2 due to time constraints, but 1 will be too small an intervention. So apart from collecting the above mentioned data, you can also see how the development happens from one cycle to another. This is key, as this will show if there is true acceptance and growth in light of the intervention in the organization. You can also do personal interviews with key stakeholders on a weekly basis, or even do a focus group discussion during the intervention meeting itself. So in our intervention meetings, the first half an hour was oral reporting. So although they had filled forms, they reported verbally, and sometimes what they shared then and the stories they shared were much more richer than the form they sent us. So in conclusion, I want to exhort you, encourage you. I want you to take heart, jump into the field, and give your best. You're going to be change makers, transformers, but you're also going to be researchers. Study carefully. Understand the mechanisms that are in place for transformation to happen. And what you learn and gauge from there is the new findings you bring to the world. Thank you and enjoy.